Welcome to the Egg Whisperer Show, a program exclusively designed to promote reproductive health awareness and discuss fertility preservation options. Here is your host, the Harvard-educated fertility specialist, Dr. Amy.
She's known as the Egg Whisperer.
Fertility expert Dr. Amy Abazadeh.
And you have yet another success story
Just launched by an East Bay fertility doctor.
Welcome to the Egg Whisperer Show. Thank you for joining me tonight. Tonight's episode is 9 things that can increase your risk of infertility. And if you know me, I actually don't like the word infertility. I consider myself a fertility expert. My patients are not infertile because infertile implies that they cannot get pregnant. And every patient that I see that walks through my door, I think of them as fertile people. So this is the thing. If you're trying to get pregnant and you're having trouble, it would be kind of nice to know what those 9 things are that could potentially prevent you from getting pregnant before you start getting pregnant. So that's why I did this show, because I want everyone to know what these 9 things are. Because if you didn't know what they are and you just assumed that some things were normal when they really weren't, well, maybe I can save one person out there from having a fertility struggle. And that's why I do these shows. I do these shows because I know there are people out there that don't have access to fertility doctors down the street in their city. So just know that if you have a question, you can always live chat us here in the studio. You can send a question through any social media page that I have, and we'll be sure to answer it. So thank you for joining tonight, and I hope you learn a lot. So the first thing that could potentially cause troubles conceiving are DNA variants. As people, we spend so much time, especially here in California, focusing on what we eat, how much exercise we get, how organic we eat especially. But at the end of the day, a lot of our fertility issues are programmed in our DNA. And some people have DNA variants, for example, that can result in having early menopause. So how would you know if you have one of those DNA variants? Well, you can actually get checked. So for my patients, I talk to them about doing a fertility gene test. And there's a reason why I have a series of Harry Potter books up here. So think about it this way. We're all made up of chromosomes, 23 pairs, so 46 chromosomes. Think of that as a full set of Harry Potter books. Now imagine one of those pages was bent. Not missing, but bent. So maybe you had a variant that might increase your risk of, like I said, early menopause or miscarriage. So in 2018, you can actually get tests done that tell you about what your DNA says about your fertility. Think of it as a 23andMe test for your fertility genes. And thank goodness for companies like 23andMe, because they make getting genetic information more likely for people to understand and get done, because it's just part of what we do anyways. So number 2 is an unhealthy body size. So body size is something that we can control. And if you've ever heard me on this show, you'll hear me say that your fertility isn't skin deep. So the last thing I want people to do is think that they need to lose weight and wait and wait and wait until they get to that goal body size before they should start trying to conceive. If you think that your body size might not be low enough, meet with a doctor and get the facts. But there are easy ways to calculate your BMI. You just go online and just put in calculator for BMI. You'll put in your height and your weight. And what studies show is that if your BMI is over 30, you might have a harder time conceiving. Your lining might be less receptive for an embryo to stick and grow. If your BMI is under 20, it also might be harder to get pregnant because your lining might not be thick enough. You might have a harder time ovulating. So find out from your fertility doctor as to whether your BMI is considered a healthy BMI. And if you're trying to conceive or you're planning your future pregnancy, simply go to a website calculator, calculate your BMI, and see if you're considered a healthy BMI and get help if you need to. So the third thing, believe it or not, this is true. Abnormal sleep patterns. So patients who don't have a normal circadian rhythm, and I'll tell you more about what that means, might have a harder time getting pregnant. So there's this hormone, it's called melatonin. It peaks by 11 p.m. every single night. So there's actually a reason why I tell my patients, try and get good sleep, try and go to sleep early enough, and try and get enough hours of sleep so that you have a normal circadian rhythm. And people who don't, for example, men, they might have lower testosterone levels as a result, and that can result in, you all know what that is lower sperm counts. And so we all know it takes one egg to get pregnant, but it kind of takes 40 million sperm cells. So if the sperm count is lower than normal, it might take longer to try and conceive. So this is something simple that you can do. Easier said than done. I know if you're working night shifts and you have to put in that time before you can move to a day shift job, maybe consider finding a new job where you're working during the day and sleeping all through the night. So the next thing that can possibly contribute to infertility are fibroids. So fibroids can be as insignificant as having a freckle or a mole on your face. So I tell patients, imagine you have a freckle on your face. That's like a fibroid, and in your situation, it's not going to affect your fertility at all. However, if there's a fibroid that's sitting, let's say, in the middle of your uterus, or maybe it's so big that it's shifting or distorting your uterus over, well, what that might do is make it so that egg pickup from the fallopian tube just doesn't happen. And that might make getting pregnant more difficult to do. So how would you know if you had fibroids? Well, some of the symptoms are heavy bleeding, bleeding in between your periods, feeling a swelling in your tummy. That would actually be a really big fibroid. And if, let's say, your mom had fibroids, your sister had fibroids, that might be a sign that it's a genetic thing. So ask your doctor for an ultrasound before you start planning for your pregnancy. And then if you have any of the symptoms that I just mentioned, certainly ask for a pelvic ultrasound. And obviously I'm biased, but I think that every woman should have a pelvic ultrasound done before they try to conceive. Because imagine the frustration. Imagine you're trying to conceive 6 months, it still hasn't happened. 1 year, it still hasn't happened. And you finally get a pelvic ultrasound to find out that you had a fibroid sitting right in the middle of your uterus. And that would block the ability of an embryo to stick and grow. And so that whole time while you were waiting and trying, you could have had the fibroid removed. So I've had patients where I diagnose a fibroid, I remove it, and then they get pregnant. And that's really, that's quite rewarding. But at the same time, I wish that patient had had that ultrasound done before they started trying. So be sure to get a preconception appointment with your OBGYN, your local fertility doctor, get a fertility health checkup to see if you have a fibroid uterus. So another issue that can really get in the way of getting pregnant, and what studies show is it actually can take years before a woman can get accurately diagnosed, and that's a condition called endometriosis. And endometriosis is not that uncommon. So with endometriosis, you may have painful periods, you might have also spotting in between your periods, you might have painful intercourse. But the issue that endometriosis can cause, it can cause not only blocked fallopian tubes, it can also cause a distorted uterus, distorted anatomy, and that's what makes it harder to get pregnant. And you can also get cysts on your ovaries that can affect the quality of your eggs. So again, how would you know if you had endometriosis? Well, you might have some of the symptoms that I just mentioned, but again, it can be genetic. You can have a DNA variant for it that you acquired from your mom or your dad. So be sure to talk to your family members, get a family fertility history taken. You can do it yourself by just asking them. But if you feel like you have these symptoms, get checked. And there are certainly things that you can do to prevent the progression of endometriosis. And depending on your age, getting your fertility levels checked can also help guide you as to whether you should be considering something like, let's say, egg freezing. Because endometriosis is one of those things, sadly, that we do not have a cure for. Unlike fibroids where you can remove them, certainly they can come back. But with endometriosis, when you remove it, there's a high chance that it can actually come back. So another thing that can cause infertility is blocked fallopian tubes. So there's one reason to always use a condom, and that is because if you acquire an infection like chlamydia, if you're someone who's watching this show who isn't ready to get pregnant, you should know this. One exposure to chlamydia can affect your fallopian tubes. And if your fallopian tubes are blocked, what that can do is make you need IVF. So IVF was invented for young women with fallopian tube blockages. So there's a simple way to check if your fallopian tubes are blocked or not, and that is through an HSG. It's basically an X-ray, and that's the picture that I have next to me. It's an X-ray of your uterus and your fallopian tubes. So how do you know if your fallopian tubes are blocked? Well, I'm showing you an x-ray here. There's no exam, there's no ultrasound. I think one of the myths about fallopian tube blockages is that women think that if their fallopian tubes are blocked, their eggs wouldn't be coming down and then they wouldn't be having periods. But there's no sign or symptom of fallopian tube blockage. It's only something that you can diagnose based on laparoscopy, a special type of ultrasound called FemView or a saline sonogram with, I call it the bubble test, or HSG, or the dye test, like I said, with laparoscopy. So if you've ever had, let's say, a pelvic surgery, abdominal surgery, some sort of infection, or if you've been trying for a year or even less, or you have a gut feeling there might not be something right with your tubes, get your fallopian tubes checked before too long, because finding out again that you've been trying an entire year just to find out that your fallopian tubes are blocked after an entire year of heartache, that can be really, really frustrating. So again, if you have any of those risk factors, be sure to get them checked before you plan your pregnancy. So this is not necessarily a picture of a sperm cell, but a picture of a swimmer. And we all know, like I said, that it takes one egg and millions of sperm cells to have a natural conception at home. And ICSI, intracytoplasmic sperm injection, ICSI, was invented for men with low sperm counts. So just like IVF was invented for women with blocked fallopian tubes, ICSI was invented for men with really low sperm counts. So if, let's say, your partner has a history of an undescended testicle, or if he's been on chemotherapy medications, let's say as a child, he may have low sperm counts. And there are certainly medications that a man can take, like calcium channel blockers, that can prevent fertilization of the sperm cell, or fertilization of an egg cell. So getting your sperm checked is actually quite easy. If only getting your eggs checked was as easy as getting your sperm checked. It just takes a cup. There are a number of companies that do home collections, and you can also go to a local clinic, a local, for example, Quest, to get your sperm checked as well. So if there's any reason to get your sperm checked, just get it done, because again, trying at home for a long period of time to find out that there was a sperm issue that could have been fixed, well, that's frustrating. So I ask guys to put their sperm through a sperm fitness challenge to see a urologist, a male fertility specialist, who can check under the hood and see if there are any issues down there. And if there are any hormonal issues, there are always things that you can do. I think one of the biggest problems of dealing with fertility patients is sometimes they're scared, they're confused, and they're worried that something's going to be learned about them that could potentially prevent them from having kids. But I consider all these diagnostic tests as powerful, informative tools that can help people in a way that will decrease their heartache down the road. So another fertility factor that people may not realize are autoimmune diseases. So what are some autoimmune diseases? I've actually already mentioned one of them, and that's endometriosis. And in the beginning of the show, I mentioned another one, and that's early menopause. So another example would be diabetes or thyroid disease. So a number of autoimmune conditions can actually make it harder to get pregnant. So if you've already been diagnosed with, let's say, diabetes, PCOS, endometriosis, thyroiditis, it may not be a bad idea to meet with a fertility expert before you start planning your pregnancy, so that you make sure you have all the information you need to make that path to pregnancy as smooth as possible. So the ninth and last fertility factor that I want everyone to know about, something that can cause infertility, and that's reproductive toxins. So reproductive toxins are everywhere, but especially BPA. So BPA is something that's often used in plastics. It's in the liner of canned foods, sodas. So when I meet with my patients, I always ask them, how many cans of Coca-Cola do you drink, or Diet Coke or Diet Pepsi? And it's not so much about what's inside the can, but what is holding the fluid or the liquid. So try and avoid things that have BPA in them. And glass bottles are always good, but try and limit your exposure to reproductive toxins to increase your chance for pregnancy. So thank you for watching tonight's show. I hope these 9 things are things that will help you in the future. If you feel like you don't know what your fertility karma is, get your levels checked. You can get an easy fertility health checkup with your OBGYN through me at eggwhisperer.com. You can always ask questions on this show through Facebook, Twitter, YouTube. I'm always here for you. I hope you can always get ahead of infertility, and thank you for watching tonight's show. Have a great night.
Welcome to the Egg Whisperer Show, a program exclusively designed to promote reproductive health awareness and discuss fertility preservation options. Here is your host, the Harvard-educated fertility specialist, Dr. Amy.
She's known as the Egg Whisperer.
Fertility expert Dr. Amy Abazadeh.
And you have yet another success story.
Just launched by an East Bay fertility doctor.
Welcome to the Egg Whisperer Show, a program exclusively designed to promote reproductive health awareness and discuss fertility preservation options.